Listen. Now, I told you on the last one that they played this off like an odd couple love story. The Venom fanbase let the devil in and came after me, only for it to literally become a part of their marketing.
Yeah, it's 100% a love story. It opens up with this is a love story, you know.
In fact, it actually even helped their last video since the studio had claimed it right within the first month, but I convinced them that it was a positive review by changing the title to a line in the video about it being a rom-com, and poof, the claim was gone.
Like a turd in the wind.
This one's not gonna be that. Kind of like their names for the Spidey world. It seems like they're just throwing things at the screen and hoping something sticks, because they've gone from calling this thing Sony's Marvel Universe to Sony's Universe of Marvel Characters, and then Sony Pictures Universe of Marvel Characters, and now finally it's Sony's Spider-Man Universe, as if like Spider-Verse wasn't right there. In my opinion, it does have one of the best after-credit scenes in recent superhero movies, but the post scene should not be better than your entire film. Let me explain.
Enjoy the show!
Now, personally, I think one of the things that made the last one so effective was the way that it was able to balance its tone, and that's all thanks to the director that they had for that one, Ruben Fleischer, who also did Zombieland. But this time around, they swapped him out for Andy Serkis, who is a pro when it comes to effects. But even then, I don't think the action was as good as the first one, and they didn't juggle the script's shifts as well as the last one. Hardy continues to have an executive producer credit, and is also now the story by writer. He's really made this his baby, even having knee surgery right before filming, and then just not missing a beat. He pretty much used that movie Lock that he did back in the day in order to practice for his monologues, where he comes in to record Venom's lines. The audio guys mix it and add effects while he's in makeup, and then he just listens to himself and acts while the whole set is just watching him go berserk. And while he's not as frantic, I can't deny that the dude's still committed to it, even though I did like the previous villain better.
My character isn't trying to like take over the world. He's just trying to make a better world with him in charge of it.
Now, Woody Harrelson signed on to that last after credits. I would call it a sequence because it was so long, because he obviously knew the director who did Zombieland, so he didn't even read the script. He was just given that hard knockoff Annie wig and tested out accents before he even knew what the story was. So this time around, we actually get to see more of it. It's these two natural-born killers who met in a home for unwanted kids, and because they cause so much chaos, they end up getting separated and moved to Ravencroft, which, interestingly enough, in this movie is subbed as Ravencroft West, since in the original comics, you know, the location is on the East Coast, thus pushing a little bit of that multiverse scope of things. But timelines be damned for their love which transcends all, as Cletus is able to finagle Eddie into writing about his serial killer story, but it also puts Eddie back on the map as he's able to discover where he left all the bodies in what is the goofiest way possible. Like, no joke, Venom really spied with his gigantic eyes Cassidy's cell, which had all these markings which the guards at this high-max prison just didn't see, and I kid you not, Venom takes a mental snapshot, later etch-a-sketches it for Eddie at his apartment, and conveniently Google picks the exact angle that Cassidy would have been in and carved into his cell. Like, what in the JJ? Just before he's about to go on death row, Eddie literally gets too close to the case and Cassidy bites him, causing him to swallow his Venom, and he turns into Carnage. And while they made such a big deal about him being the red one and being worse, they really do just tame it down because they're forcing it to be PG-13. And the last one, Hardy even complained about too much being cut out, and it really can't be maximum carnage if it can't even pass being an R for sales. It just comes off edgy like a Mighty Kids meal. Obviously, Cassidy ends up surviving his death sentence, Tazes his way out of there, and then literally just hacks the internet faster than a T-Mobile server in order to break out his girl. And I will say that I like the dynamic of Francis now having these shrieking powers that end up clashing with Cletus, who now has Carnage in him because...
Sound is like his kryptonite?
And fire.
Fire and fire.
But I don't think they did enough with it. There is substance in the script, in my opinion, and they repeat it over and over and over again. But the closest that they get to the themes is that Don Quixote speech about opposites attracting and finding the best in each other, which of course leads us to the Vetti therapy sessions. See, if the first one was when Eddie met Venom, then this is Sleepless in San Francisco. Like, Brock gets into more fights with his parasite than Shinichi.
This is about me wanting to live without you, whining in my ear all the time about eating bad guys or like nagging me. You are a pariah!
He's serving as the breadwinner reporter while Venom's in the kitchen washing and drying, obviously leading to a nasty breakup where Venom ends up prowling around town, entering body to body, but just not being able to find that perfect match that was Edward. Like, he really goes to a rave and exclaims that he's out of the Eddie closet as he gives an alien acceptance speech, not even being fazed by the mic feedback when he drops it because his heart is in more pain.
How dare you!
Man, those two need some serious couples counseling.
Now, if you remember, in the last one, they legit already made out, and this time around, he goes back into Anne, has that three-way pass with Dr. Dan, and even at one point includes Miss Chen.
I am happy to eat, Mrs. Chen.
No, you cannot eat, Mrs. Chen. What?
But where it really gets weird is when you realize that Carnage is technically Venom's son.
Ultimately, Carnage, And Cletus Cassidy being the nemesis of Venom and his son, so you've got a father-son movie too.
Oh, shit!
Which means that when Woody bit Tom, he must have had a hearty. But not as much as Sony always has for their promos in these movies, because the only thing they repeated more than
Sound is like his kryptonite?
And fire.
Fire and fire.
was how fire the sound was on these crisp Sony Bravia OLED TVs. Like, there is straight up a cop character who truly believes in his heart that Ed is fully responsible for the deaths of dozens of SWAT and, just authority personnel who he himself has trained alongside with. Like, he's interrogating Eddie because he's the only one who's conveniently always there at every single and he literally goes, yo, bro, nice TV. Man, I should have jumped on my Ducati Scrambler full throttle and gone to go get one.
They've turned a KTM dirt bike, which is what I normally ride, into a Ducati. To an untrained eye, you wouldn't even notice it.
The big climax happens at a cathedral during what they call a red wedding in order to see which symbiote will hold the throne, and each person has someone they want to go after. Carnage wants to go get Venom, Woody wants Eddie, Francis wants the cop who shot her, and Dr. Dan just wants to get the hell out of there. And if you saw it in Dolby, I do think that it was mixed very well while they're doing all the fight sequences, and while it is obviously a CGI fest, the only gripe I really had was that when you have the ability to choreograph whatever you want, why keep it so tame? Like, we're at a point where every character in the Sony Pictures Marvelous Spidey-matic Macrocosm by Evie I Read has these tentacles that they can use, and while we see Venom literally use them earlier on in the movie, they're completely absent when he needs them the most. Of course, in the end, they're able to spawn a win as they slam Francis and give her a ring. Venom finally gets the head he wants from Cassidy and consumes Carnage as they all live long enough to see another sequel. And they cut to that new Eminem song. I think the first one was a little corny, but man really said in this one that he's got bread, but is still sourdough. He legit compares himself to the Twin Tower planes and edits in the crashing sound effects. It was so bad that when the main song actually gets played in the end credits, they had to cut down his verse and told Marsha to sit down. Now, this was easily the best part of the movie. So Eddie and Venom are staying at the White Lotus and then magically get shifted to what feels like a parallel dimension. And we had already seen the Daily Bugle being shown earlier in the movie and even saw that Eddie was writing for it. But when you look back at the first one and you remember that rocket that actually brought the symbiotes onto Earth, there was an astronaut on there who's actually meant to be J. Jonah Jameson's son. And of course, the one and only JJ appears again to play him. So at this point, you got the SSU and the MCU, who have really only been sharing Tom Holland's Spider-Man because of rights issues. And everyone remembers the whole contract debacle that was happening not too long ago. But more and more with this multiverse stuff, it feels like everything's going to cross over just like they do in the comics. So because Venom takes place in San Francisco, I don't know if that means he's going to come across Ant-Man or Shang-Chi, but I personally hope that things don't get too crazy and that everyone's just hopping dimensions like willy-nilly so that they can actually finish off franchises that have just been left hanging there, because I personally think Tom Hardy is too old to go up against Tom Holland and his MCU Spidey. I still feel like he should go back to his original universe and fight his Spider-Man, which I really hope ends up being Andrew Garfield, and thus they can finally finish their Sinister Six tease. We can finally get those cutout Mary Jane and Mr. Parker storylines, and everyone can cross over but still go home, because as producer Amy Pascal puts it, if it works for everybody, it's gonna work for everybody.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thank you all for watching this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. They could have gone R with this, but the most they snuck in there was what would technically be the first F-bomb in an MCU affiliated movie. The MCU hasn't done one, but when it says in association with Marvel, they would, I guess, be the first to a degree, even though I think that's just for Sony, because really when you look at the Fox stuff, I believe they've already said it over there. But other than that, I do think the effects were some of the best stuff that they had in the movie. Some of it was a little bit dark, but I did like that postcard red pen animation that they were doing. It was cool to see, Stan Lee cameo. He was obviously in the first Venom, and they were able to find a way to put him in here in a magazine. But again, I'm curious your thoughts on how the whole multiverse thing is going to go. Do you think it'll get too out of hand? Obviously, we're all going to flip out once they start revealing more things in the upcoming Spider-Man movie, but it'll be interesting to see how they expand it and still kind of keep it grounded. I do hope that they all continue their own stuff. Like Sony obviously has that Morbius movie. At the end of this one, the cop has his eyes glowing as well, so we'll see what that ends up being. But it's one of the best times to be a comic fan, I will say that, because it's pretty much a playground cinematically as everything just gets compiled together. So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll send you a Ducati.